Rebecca Coriam grew up in Chester, England with her parents, her sister Rachel, and her two foster brothers. In 2010, at 23 years old, Rebecca applied for a position with the Disney Cruise Line. She went through their training in Florida and then spent the next 4 months sailing with Disney through the Bahamas. She then returned home to England for 2 months to rest and see her family. When she came back to the States, she was assigned to the Disney Wonder as a youth worker. Rebecca kept in constant touch with her family via Skype or Facebook. On March 21, 2011, Rebecca messaged her family via Facebook and told them that she'd be in touch with them the next day. On March 22, 2011, Disney's cruise itinerary had them sailing to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. At 9 a.m., Rebecca failed to show up for her shift. They searched her room and all over the ship, but there was no sign of her. They were able to find some CCTV footage of Rebecca at 5:45 a.m. on one of the phones in the main crew area. Rebecca seemed extremely distraught. On the footage, you can see a male crew member walking up to her, tapping her on the shoulder and asking her if she's okay, to which she mouthed back, "I'm fine." She is then seen hanging up the phone and walking away. That is the last publicly reported image of Rebecca. After having the crew search the entire ship, the U.S. Coast Guard and the Mexican Navy helped look for Rebecca in the ocean. They then gave up their searches, and the Disney Wonder returned to its port in Los Angeles on March 25th. Disney called Rebecca's parents and broke the news. Rebecca's parents were immediately flown in from England. Because the Disney Wonder is registered in the Bahamas, a Bahamian detective was flown in to investigate Rebecca's disappearance. Rebecca's family met with the detective, and he told them that he had only spent 1 day on board the ship investigating what had happened. Her family found all of Rebecca's belongings in her room, including her passport. Rebecca's family had ruled out suicide and said that they had found some Disney passes that Rebecca had purchased as a surprise for her family when she returned to England. The captain told the Coriams that he believed that Rebecca was swept overboard by a rogue wave when she was in the crew pool. He explained that the seas were particularly rough that morning. However, Rebecca's family did not believe that explanation. In October of 2011, a reporter named John Ronson took the exact same cruise on the Disney Wonder. He discreetly questioned the crew about what they thought really happened to Rebecca that morning. The workers that he spoke to were insistent that Rebecca was swept out to sea while relaxing in the crew pool. They also hinted that Disney knew a lot more about what happened to Rebecca than what they let on. The reporter also learned that Disney had put flowers on the wall outside of the crew pool the day after Rebecca's disappearance, which caused even more rumors. People wondered if the cameras had actually picked something up that they didn't want to disclose. The reporter took note of the fact that there were cameras all over the crew pool area. One of the workers was insistent that Disney did in fact have footage of what happened to Rebecca that morning, but they just didn't want the bad publicity. Other crew members divulged that Rebecca's upsetting phone call that morning was recorded and that she was involved in a love triangle on the ship. The British government also got involved in Rebecca's disappearance. They have been openly critical about how Disney handled Rebecca vanishing off of the ship. They also claim to believe that foul play was involved. Rebecca's parents hired a private investigator to look more into her disappearance, and he was able to confirm that there were no rough seas that night, which of course was contrary to what her family had been told. He claimed that the wave would have had to have been 100 feet tall to reach up to where Rebecca was and wash her off of the ship. The Coriams filed suit against Disney and settled out of court for an undisclosed amount in 2015. Many people believe that there is CCTV footage of Rebecca going overboard that hasn't been made public to avoid bad publicity and accusations of negligence. To this day, it is unknown what happened to Rebecca on the Disney Wonder that morning. Her body has never been found, and her disappearance is still under investigation. Merrian Carver was a 40-year-old divorced mother of one who was living in Boston, Massachusetts. She decided to take a 7-day Alaskan cruise in August of 2004. She booked her trip through Celebrity Cruise Lines on their ship called Mercury. The ship departed out of Seattle, Washington on August 27th. Miriam had not told anyone in her family that she had booked this cruise. Her 13-year-old daughter was staying with her ex-husband in England at the time. On August 28th, Miriam's cabin steward claims that he saw her early in that morning. However, that is the last time that she was seen. On the morning of August 29th, he noticed that Miriam's bed had not been slept in. He reported this to his supervisor, who allegedly told him, "Just forget it and do your job." Every day for the next 5 days, Domingo reported that it did not appear that Miriam was staying in her cabin. However, his concerns were ignored and he continued to put the customary chocolates on her pillow. The cruise continued on and had multiple stops in Alaska and also British Columbia. Miriam did not get off of the ship at any of these ports. On September 3rd, the ship stopped at its final destination of Vancouver, British Columbia. Once again, Miriam's cabin steward went to his supervisor and told him that it did not appear that Miriam had ever returned to her cabin and that her belongings were still there, even though everyone else had departed the ship. The shocking response of the supervisor once again was, "Don't worry about it, I'll take care of it, bring all of her belongings to me." Domingo did as he was told, and all of Miriam's belongings were either given away or put in storage. No one contacted the police or her family about her disappearance. On September 7th, when Miriam's daughter couldn't reach her, she finally called her grandparents. Miriam was finally reported missing. When detectives went through Miriam's credit card charges, they discovered that she had booked the 7-day Alaskan cruise. When Miriam's father called the cruise line, they said that yes, she had been on board, but that she had disappeared at some point during the cruise. Domingo's supervisor was immediately fired. The investigation into her disappearance revealed that Miriam had never used her sea pass. She had never bought one drink or one item while she was on the ship, and it also revealed that she had never left the ship at any of its ports. They requested to see the CCTV footage from the cruise to help in investigating Miriam's disappearance. They were told by the cruise line that all footage was deleted after 12 days. They later found out that this was a lie, and footage is actually deleted after 30 days. However, it was too late to make a difference, and the footage had been deleted. Miriam's family filed suit against Celebrity Cruise Lines in March of 2005. In response to the lawsuit, Celebrity stated that they believed that Miriam committed suicide by jumping from one of the open-air decks. It was discovered that a few years back before the cruise, after Miriam's divorce, she had threatened to harm herself. However, her family claimed that she was now in a very good place, and they strongly believe that she did not take her own life. Miriam's father, Ken Carver, has spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to find out what happened to his daughter. He started the group International Cruise Victims with others who had also lost their loved ones on a cruise. I will link this in the description. In 2013, some human bones were found on Mary Island in Canada. Police stated that they suspected they were the remains of Merrian Carver. They contacted her father in hopes that DNA testing would reveal whether or not it was her. After quite a bit of digging while making this video, I've been unable to find anything that states there was any verification or positive identification on whether or not that was her. She is still listed on the Charlie Project, so my assumption is that they are not. Julie Scully was a 31-year-old beautiful mother and a part-time model. She lived in Trenton, New Jersey with her husband Tim Nist and their toddler Katie. She was frequently featured in Page 6 and other publications as a bikini model. In 1997, Tim and Julie decided to go on a cruise. On that cruise, they met 22-year-old crew member George Skiadopoulos. George was from Greece and barely spoke any English. According to reports, he was very charming, but he was also very manipulative and very conniving. At first, both Tim and Julie were friends with George. However, whenever Tim wasn't around, George would shower Julie with compliments and attention and tell her that she was the most beautiful woman that he had ever seen and all of the things that Julie loved to hear. When they returned to New Jersey, George began calling and writing Julie almost daily. He was on a mission to make Julie his. Julie's marriage began to get very rocky, and Tim suspected something, even once saying that he walked in and heard Julie talking to him in a very quiet tone. In February of 1998, Julie told Tim she wanted to go on another cruise. When Tim asked her where she wanted to go, she said she wanted to go on the exact same boat on the exact same itinerary. Tim thought this was stupid and a waste of time, but she was eventually able to change his mind. During the second cruise, George and Julie brought their relationship to the next level and began a full-blown physical affair. After the cruise, Tim saw a phone bill for $1,200 and he knew something was going on. He confronted Julie about it and she admitted to the affair with George and filed for divorce. George came to visit Julie in New Jersey and her friends and family could not stand him. They found him jealous, possessive, overbearing, and quite frankly, repulsive. Julie's mother, Julia, was quoted as saying that she had absolutely no idea what her daughter saw in George and that he was disgusting, and the only thing that they could figure out was just it was the amount of attention that George showered on Julie. During George's visit to meet her family and friends in New Jersey, Julie's mom openly voiced her concerns and her opinions on him, and George actually became violent with Julie's mom and choked her. Julie's ex-husband, Tim, was shocked by what was going on, and he knew that Julie loved their daughter, Katie, with all of her heart, but he was so concerned about the situation that he had primary custody of Katie. George begged Julie to move back to Greece with him, but Julie was reluctant to leave her daughter. George made a bunch of false promises saying she could leave whenever she wanted and visit Katie. In November of 1998, Julie finally relented and headed off to Greece to be with her new love, George. The first 2 weeks in Greece were pretty much everything that the two wanted. They even got their marriage license. However, Julie quickly became very depressed. She missed her daughter and she was incredibly homesick. She was even beginning to question her feelings for George. On January 8, 1999, while on a car ride on a dirt country road in Greece, Julie informed George that she was leaving him. This caused George to become completely enraged and a violent fight ensued. George wrapped his hands around Julie's throat and strangled her to death. After he killed her, he panicked and tried to burn her body. When that didn't work, he tried to put her in his suitcase, and when she didn't fit, he removed her head and threw it into the Aegean Sea. He put the rest of her body in the suitcase and threw it in a swamp. Julie's ex-husband, Tim, hired a private investigator to go to Greece. He learned that George had a very violent and troubled past. On January 26th of 1999, George Skiadopoulos was arrested. He confessed to everything and was sentenced to life in prison with no parole. George Smith from Greenwich, Connecticut was pretty much your total package. He was very attractive, athletic, very social, and well-liked. He met Jennifer Hagel, who was a third-grade teacher, and the two fell madly in love. George and Jennifer were married in what was described as a storybook wedding in Newport, Rhode Island on June 25th of 2005. They booked a 2-week Mediterranean cruise to celebrate their honeymoon. They booked the cruise through Royal Caribbean on their massive ship, the Brilliance of the Seas. The ship departed from Barcelona, Spain, and then had stops in Greece and was set to port in Turkey. On July 4th, 2005, Jennifer and George had stopped in Greece and had a wonderful time. They walked around the whitewashed towns, and they even ran into actress Tara Reid, and George stopped and had a photo taken with her. When they returned to the ship, they had a romantic dinner and decided to go down to the casino and have some drinks. George and Jennifer had been drinking heavily throughout the night. It was in the casino that George met up with 20-year-old Josh Askin. Askin was one of the new friends they had made on the cruise, and George was teaching him how to play craps. Also joining them in the casino that night were Russian cousins Zachary and Greg Rosenberg and their friend Rusty Kaufman. Later, after everything happened, George's family mentioned that George was wearing a Breitling watch that night and was always very well put together, and it could have given some people the impression that he was wealthier than he actually was. Lloyd Botaw was a casino supervisor who worked on the ship. According to multiple witnesses, Jennifer and Lloyd were a bit too cozy for everyone's comfort level that night. At around 2:30 a.m., the group left the casino and went to the discotheque. George was with the 4 men, and Jennifer and Lloyd showed up at the table. It was reported that the group was drinking from a bottle of absinthe that had been smuggled onto the ship. Jennifer and George got into a huge fight where Jennifer ended up kicking him in the crotch and storming out. Allegedly, the Royal Caribbean employee followed her out. George was too drunk to walk alone back to his cabin, and the 4 men helped him. Jennifer was not there. Shortly after George and the 4 men returned to the room, the neighbor next to them, Cleet Hyman, who was also a police officer, called in to report them because they were making too much noise. When questioned later, Josh Askin said that all 4 of the men left George's cabin at the same time. However, the neighbor stated that when he looked out of the peephole of his door, he only saw 3 men leaving. A short time later, Cleet Hyman said that he heard a very loud thud. At 5 a.m., crew members found Jennifer passed out in the hallway. They returned her to her cabin and George was not there. Even though George had not yet returned to the room, Jennifer went to her scheduled spa appointment a few hours later. During her spa appointment, Jennifer was paged as the crew had found blood all over the lifeboat canopy below their deck. They were wondering if George or Jennifer had been hurt. It was then that they realized in horror that George had gone overboard. The bloodstain is believed to be in the shape of George's body. Josh Askin and Jennifer were both removed from the ship by the Turkish police, where they were questioned and later released. Jennifer immediately flew home to Connecticut. Incredibly, the 3 men that were the last people to see George Smith alive were not questioned by Turkish police. They were removed from the ship several days later, however, when a 20-year-old woman came forward and said that they had attacked her. Jennifer reached a $1.1 million settlement with Royal Caribbean over George's death. She got remarried in 2009 and now has 2 children. She is estranged from George's family over the details of what happened that night. George's family continues to believe that George was murdered that night. They were outraged to find out that the FBI had closed the investigation into George's death in 2015. 23-year-old Amy Lynn Bradley was vacationing with her family on the Royal Caribbean cruise ship Rhapsody of the Seas in March of 1998. Amy was a trained lifeguard and had just graduated from the University of Virginia with a degree in physical education. On the cruise with her were her parents, Ron and Iva Bradley, and her younger brother, Brad. When the ship was docked in Aruba, Amy had bought all kinds of presents for her friends and was sending them postcards. A few really creepy things had clouded what was otherwise an idyllic family cruise. From the minute they boarded the ship, Amy's mother, Iva, noticed that some of the crew members were giving Amy a little too much attention. One night at dinner, one of the waiters even approached Amy's parents and asked for her by name. They told her parents they wanted to take her to a restaurant while the ship was docked in Aruba. This made Amy's parents extremely uncomfortable, and they told Amy about it. Amy allegedly told her parents that she would never go anywhere with the crew because they gave her the creeps. Later that same night, Amy and her family attended a party on the upper deck where the band was playing. During the party, Amy and her mother went down to the 4th floor deck photo gallery to check out all of the pictures that had been taken of the vacationers that day. Amy's mom remembers that what really creeped them out was when they got there, everyone had their pictures up except Amy's were missing. They were so concerned about it that they called the photo gallery supervisor over and asked him where Amy's pictures were. He stated to them that he remembered developing them and putting them out, and he had no idea where they had gone. So they had him redevelop all of her pics, but Amy's mom said it really bothered them. Later that night, Amy and her brother Brad went to the ship's nightclub. Amy was seen hanging out with members of the ship's band Blue Orchid. One member in particular, Yellow, was paying a lot of attention to Amy, and she was seen dancing with him. On the next day, one of the other members said that they saw Amy leave the dance floor around 1 a.m. However, there is CCTV footage found of Amy dancing with Yellow at 3 a.m. So whether it was intentional or not, there was some incorrect information given regarding Amy's timeline that night. Amy's father, Ron, saw Amy sleeping on the balcony of their cabin at 5:30 a.m. When he went back to check on her again at 6 a.m., Amy was gone. Amy's brother Bradley told the family that he had seen Amy in between 5:30 and 6 a.m. and that she had told him that she was going to go off of the ship and get cigarettes. The ship was in the process of docking at Curacao, and Amy left the cabin with no shoes, no ID, and just her lighter and her remaining cigarettes. According to Amy's family, when they reported her missing, the crew was very slow to act. They inexplicably allowed the passengers to disembark the ship before they started the searches. They said that the ship didn't want to put flyers up or Amy's pictures up because they didn't want to scare the other passengers. Eventually, however, there were extensive searches done for Amy on the ship and in the ocean. The Netherlands Coast Guard and Royal Caribbean Cruise Line both searched for Amy for days. On March 29, 1998, all searches for Amy Bradley stopped. The FBI launched a very intensive investigation into everyone in Amy's life. Teachers, neighbors, friends, her parents, and her brother were given polygraphs. There were just no leads. In the decades since Amy's disappearance, there have been tips called in with alleged sightings of Amy. One of the tipsters, David Carmichael, had just watched an episode of Unsolved Mysteries that had featured Amy. He said that he was confident that Amy was the same woman that he had seen on the beach when he was with his dive partner. He said that Amy was walking towards him. He recognized her tattoos, that she had the Tasmanian devil tattoo. He says that she was in between two men. They passed about 12 inches apart. They briefly made eye contact and that the two men ushered her away. Many people believe that Amy Bradley was the victim of human trafficking. It's very hard to ignore all of the signs that point to that possibility. According to multiple reports that I was researching online, this particular area is a top spot for human trafficking. 80% of the women and children that are trafficked are foreigners. There were also multiple reports of pirates in the area during that time. So, of all the research I did online, people have a lot of the same questions. Were Amy's instincts and her parents' instincts right? Was Amy being singled out during that cruise? Because the cruise ship decided to wait to conduct the searches until after everyone had disembarked, were people able to smuggle Amy off of the ship? These are just questions that it doesn't look like we will ever know. There is still a very large reward for anyone who has information on her disappearance. Amy's family says that they will never give up looking for their daughter. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll be notified of any of my future videos.